Yo, 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 what is going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Cut Different TV. I'm your host, Sebastian Ryder. Don't forget the Van Gogh. And today we got a very special guest in the building today, hailing all the way from Jamaica, currently living in Queens. We got my brother DonKnock in the building today.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, brother.
For sure, bro. The Dada we here.
Definitely. And so today, obviously the purpose of the show is to understand why you cut different, what makes you cut different and stand out from all these other artists. And so I want to start by diving into your background a little bit, learning a little bit more about you and your upbringing, and then kind of bringing it to modern times. So I'll pass it over to you and love to hear your perspective.
For sure. So, I was born and raised in Bull Bay, St. Andrew. That's a part of Jamaica. It's not far off from the Norman Manley Airport. So if you land in Kingston, it's right around that area. You know what I'm saying? I moved to the U.S. when I was around 11, 12. But, I've been traveling since I was a couple months old. My dad lives in Toronto, so I always went there. And then, moved to New York when I was 12. Been here since and been living through. So, been on my music tip shortly after, I want to say, like, from college on up. Started as a producer. Now I managed to do everything, all the facets of music, You know what I'm saying? So through my experiences, that's what brought me here. So, yeah, man, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, bro. I appreciate you coming on, and we appreciate you coming on. And one of the things that we've talked about previously is kind of that journey from, starting out as a producer, tapping in with artists, starting to learn your sound as a producer, and then ultimately becoming an artist, right? And there's a lot of artists that start off that way and then transition, but what specifically about that transition stood out and what made you want to take that leap and start to do everything for yourself?
I never wanted to be an artist. Keep it a stack. I felt like I was perfectly cool with being the guy in the background making someone else great. I was perfectly fine with that. But I found that to sum up and keep it short, I got tired of putting my eggs in that basket in the sense of saying I didn't want to depend on someone else to make me successful. And I realized that as a producer, a lot of times that's what you kind of have to do. You're only as good as your last hit or your last big record, right? So, and that record is not based on necessarily anything you only do. It's also based on what that artist does. So you can have a hit record, but if the artist doesn't promote it right or is seeking funding or doing what they need to do in order to make that record successful, it will never be successful, even though it's a hit, right? So the reason why I ultimately took that step forward is because I wanted to determine my own destiny. And I was already writing for artists. I was already recording artists. I was already making beats for artists. So I think once I got like a final letdown, meaning like, I've been through a few artists, and then I was working one in particular. I was about to put out the project that we were working on, and then they kind of just lapsed. So because of that, I'm like, okay, I don't want to keep going through this. So I took matters into my own hands and decided to make my own EP, or what started out as my own EP.
And so what was the decision? Like, a lot of artists will, prior to having a fan base as an artist, they'll drop a single and they'll promote that single to the ground, right? And then once they have everybody kind of understanding, hey, this is what you can expect from me as an artist, then they drop a project. So what led you to want to lead with a project like an EP? Wasn't an album, but a short project. Was it more so to kind of establish at a deeper level what they can expect from DonKnock, or was it just, hey, I got this music, let me just put it out?
I think coming from the producer perspective, I can kind of go anywhere because I can create whatever I kind of want, right? But that also, it's too broad, right? So because of that, I think a project kind of narrowed me down. It gave me something specific to focus on. So I could kind of eliminate all the noise and then create something cohesive, or a bunch of cohesive records. And I think that's why right out the gate, I was like, okay, I'm going to head towards a project. And not only that, all the artists that I respect, and I think we all ultimately respect, the best artists in the world are typically project driven. We might, whether y'all realize it or not, you don't remember the artists that are just like singles, as much as you're going to remember the artist that gives you good projects. I could give you multiple examples of that. And that's why pop records, they do great, but how many of y'all could tell me like the names of true pop? Not some guy who became pop, but like started out as pop and it sounds like pop. Many of the times we don't even know them. We just hear them in Macy's.
Yeah. And
you know what I'm saying?
And you don't really understand that artist until they've already had their radio run.
Exactly.
And then they might get on the VMAs and then they have their project. And then they might, by the smallest shot in the dark, become a Taylor Swift. Or,
exactly.
Something like that. But a lot of artists like The Weeknd, I would argue that like Drake is pop. It's like they start off with a specific sound. And
I was going to say, though they became pop artists, right? Even Drake himself, he became a pop artist. The Weeknd became a pop artist. Weeknd sound, though very pop, just naturally, it's still different from what we would consider like pop radio. You know what I'm saying? So it was a way darker sound than what pop is known as, even though it rides on the same frequency as pop, and the content of what he was talking about was completely different from what is in your cookie cutter pop record. You know 100%. What I'm saying?
Like the trilogy, Wicked Game,
exactly.
Stuff. That wasn't made for radio.
Nope.
That was made for a dark room with candles on.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Maybe some wine.
Exactly.
For sure.
Like, who was saying, take your nose off my keyboard? What you following me for? Like, we know what it means, but we don't really know what that means. Like, what do you... I'm still stuck on the what are you following me? How do we go from the keyboard to her following?
What's on the keyboard?
Well, we know what's on the keyboard.
Yeah.
The nose is on the keyboard. We know what's on the keyboard.
Fact. Fact. Something that's not black.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
100%. So the EP you understood, and I would imagine, speaking to you now and speaking to you prior to this, like, your knowledge of music is definitely at a higher level. I would imagine you listen to songs. As a producer, you naturally develop that ear. But as an artist, it sounds like you started out with a bigger goal in mind. So dropping that project, right, and that initial response, two questions come from that, right? Like, were you satisfied with the response that you got and, from what was your fan base at the time? I know it's grown. And then also, once you dropped that project, did you have a moment where you were like, okay, like, did you rethink it? Or was it like, all right, I'm all in on this sound? So, thank you for tuning in to our interview with DonKnock. Wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsor of today's interview, Co Cafe, located in Jersey City, New Jersey. Not only is this a great opportunity for you to come through, maybe pull out the laptop, do some work, grab some coffee, and enjoy some wonderful pastries, but also the essence of Co is to build. And if you're looking to build a community, if you're looking to do a podcast, if you're looking to do anything creative, you can leverage Co Studios for that as well. But quick shout out to them, man. We really appreciate them sponsoring this video. Now back to the game.
As an artist, that project that I started out on the journey to finish, though the records are finished, we never dropped the actual project, right? So that was the Rooms project. So that project's called Rooms, and it's still going to be coming out. That's going to be, for sure, my first body of work. However, there's an idea you have when you're jumping into something, and then there's when you actually get into it, right? Mm-hmm. So you can create a plan, but when you actually get into the situation, you got to be able to navigate that. So I found that sometimes it's better to drop a record, for example, and treating that record like a project, right? It's the same idea. However, I think what happens to a lot of people in today's day and age is you put a record out and then you put out one next week and then you're going to have lots of music out there, but you didn't even give people the chance to absorb that record or really enjoy it. How many times do you have to hear something before you even recognize that you've heard it? It's like 8 times. Right. So that being said, I realized that when something's doing well, you want to put more effort behind it, or sometimes you might dial back the effort, or, but ultimately I wanted my records to be heard. Not only that, we all know what Instagram is like, so the algorithm changed quite a bit. So now when you post, everybody might not see your stuff. Right now I have 7,000, I think, followers. And I only mention that to say, like, sometimes I have to post 4 or 5 times to only still get a fraction of that amount of people to see my stuff. So that being said, if you want a record to be successful, it would probably make more sense to push it for over a period of time. You know what I'm saying? Versus just keep dropping a bunch of records, because long story short, you want to get the most or the widest you can get with an audience, versus just dropping it to a smaller group and not everyone seeing it. But when you push it over time, you kind of force people to some degree to finally acknowledge that, oh, yo, did you just drop that song? I think I saw something. You know, like I posted it once, twice, you might have skipped over it, but the third time you might be like, you know what, let me click this. I keep seeing this thing, you know what I'm saying? And I think that's kind of what happened, is that we learned that that's the best way to push a record. Now, not only that, but also starting out, right? How do I know what people like? What do I know what people want from me? I have to show them the different sides of me and then let them decide, right? Like, okay, I like DonKnock talking about women. I like DonKnock talking about guns. I like DonKnock talking about cars, right? I got to figure out what people want to hear from me, because at the end of the day, it's also a business and I got to feed my fan base, right?
100%.
So
I dig that, and that's some noteworthy content that you just gave us there. I hope y'all are tapped in and listening to what makes this man cut different. And so, you know, talking before this too, I keep referencing that conversation because to me, I learned a lot about you, and that was powerful. And so in 2020 was when you kind of made that transition from producer to artist. And so talk about that song and what that meant to you and how you've evolved since then.
So to backtrack a bit, so I did initially put out a producer project, right? And that was that initial project I was mentioning in terms of like, okay, so I decided I wanted to put out a project. And how that came about was I gathered all my artist friends at the time that I was working. I'm like, okay, I'm going to put this out. I want y'all to, yo, I see you on this beat, or yo, this song we recorded a couple months ago, you're not using it. Do you mind if, you know what I'm saying, I use it for my project, whatever, stuff like that. Collected a bunch of records, put that out. Did great in terms of like getting my initial group together. The problem I ran into though is still people were dependent when they wanted to do like a show. They would reach out. They were like, okay, can you do the show? But they didn't know I wasn't the artist. I was just making the beats and putting the records together. So now for me to get these guys to do a show, I had to get 7-8 artists together to do one show. So that wasn't quite feasible. So again, I went back and thought about how I can actually go forward with that. And then further along, started working on stuff right before the pandemic. So like basically when the pandemic hit, and I was mentioning this to you prior, I actually lost my job around that time. And it was an interesting time to lose my job because I had a conversation, like I said, with my mom about me leaving my job, my full-time job, to actually pursue music. And being a Jamaican woman and also a teacher, she's like, nah, what happened to the master's degree? Like, that's what I want you to do. I'm like, yeah, but that's not where my heart is. So once I finished the bachelor's, I knew like that was it for me, at least at the time being. So started working and then realized I wanted to leave, had that conversation, and I went in my room that night and I was like, if this is not the route I'm supposed to take, which is leaving my job and pursuing music, show me a sign. Or if this is the route, show me a sign. The next day I went into work, they let me go. There can't be no clearer of a sign than that. Like, so, and again, I was working there for 7 years. So like, it's a stint. So that being said, the only thing, once I walked out of there, and most people would probably be like, yo, what am I going to do? I just lost my job. I walked out there with a smile on my face. She was like, do you have any other questions? I'm like, nah.
That's the only answer right there.
That's it, you know? So, because I knew exactly what that meant, you know? I asked for something and I got it, you know? So once that happened, I knew exactly, okay, now it's time for me to go head first into music. The only issue is, how am I going to fund all of this stuff? I don't got no job anymore. That's
always the question.
Right. You know, and for all of y'all that's listening, music costs money, okay? I'm tired of the narrative that we're like talking down on people that have jobs. not everybody's a hustler, not everybody's a drug dealer, not everybody's a scammer, and you don't have to be either. You know what I'm saying? There's many ways to make money, you know? And I was not the guy that was taught to make money from the street, so I wasn't going to start creating a facade just because I'm trying to get to somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I also believe that things work out the way they should. So another thing that worked out the way it should, terrible time, don't get me wrong, but again, through every bad thing, there's also positive. So COVID happened about 2 weeks after I lost my job. And I ended up getting unemployment and then some, right? So I was getting probably about like $1,000 a week, which was even more than my job was paying me at the time. So it was just kind of like, there's no other sign I need than to show me that I'm going in the right direction, because everything I'm asking for, I'm getting. You know what I'm saying? And it's not like I had to wait 3 months to get answers. It's like I'm asking for this and the answer's coming right away. So the majority of that money I saved up, and every single day, that's what I did. I just recorded.
So how would you say your sound has evolved? Is it from doing shows and seeing how the audience responds? Is it, you know, the community that you built, your roommate community and the roommates and how they've reacted? That's another thing to touch on too, is the community element, right? Like going with that network and growing with a group of people. That was a shotgun question, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, the input that you get from your community, is that what swayed it, or is it naturally that ear of like, okay, I'm just really tapping into what I feel? Like, talk about that a little bit.
Nah, I think, so I always had a community to some degree because of the production side.
Of course.
But the beautiful thing is I wasn't really starting from scratch. I know exactly what it took to make a good song because I've been making them for a while.
Yeah.
However, though, when you start out, there's certain hurdles, right? Like, a lot of my songs are really melodic. You know, a lot of people really think I can sing. And I'm like, no, I just learned how to. I think everyone can sing within their range, right? So I just learned how to sing within my range. And so I started, the first record was Be Right Here. I dropped that on my birthday in 2020. And then from there, I had 3 records already done, and I released those consecutively. Copenhagen was the second one, and I shot that video actually in Copenhagen.
For those people who are thinking you're talking about the tobacco company, we're talking about Copenhagen, Denmark.
Yes,
right.
100%.
So this is a worldly man. This is a traveling man.
Well traveled.
So I guess continue, and then we'll touch on that element as well.
So I wouldn't. In my opinion, and I've never really told anyone this, those first records, which are still a lot of people's favorites, I was figuring things out. It wasn't until I dropped Regular, that was the first record where I was like, okay, I'm onto something here. Like, this is where it's at, right? And once we released it, you know, it kind of confirmed that. Based on people's reactions, you know what I'm saying? Because again, like, I dropped the other ones as well, but they didn't do what Regular did, you know what I'm saying? And I think at this point now, that's still my second biggest record. So that's what, those records were kind of like fillers. And then once I started figuring out, okay, what people want and what people don't want, it kind of helped direct me to some degree to be like, okay, so one of those things is that whole Jamaican element, which was always there, but I kind of doubled down on it because I found that that's what really made me unique. My ability to have that Jamaican perspective, but still grow up here in the U.S. And actually, when I was visiting Denmark, I was working with a producer, and he actually said it best. He said, the real cool thing about you is that you're obviously Jamaican. You sound really Jamaican. It's still really authentic. But me, as a person who's never been to Jamaica and never heard any of it, I can understand everything you're saying and feel everything that you're saying. You know what I'm saying? So, and all of the people that I think from Jamaica that I kind of want to be like, music-wise or career-wise, are similar, like a Shaggy or a Sean Paul, right? So, yeah, those are the things that brought me to ultimately figuring out, okay, this is the direction I'm trying to go musically.
Word. I dig that. Appreciate you sharing that with us. And
For sure.
For up and coming artists that are looking to, get into that space, right? Like say they found their sound, they figured out what their audience is needing, what their audience wants to hear from them. And now it's that time for them to essentially leverage their network, start to figure out shows, start to figure out how to get in front of people and showcase their art. Obviously, you've done some shows. You've done the Essence Festival in front of a bunch of people, a huge crowd of people.
For sure.
Obviously, there's ways that you get into those rooms, and maybe speak to that a little bit. Some game for maybe some up-and-coming artists to get more opportunities and be able to showcase their talent.
I'm going to say, like, the biggest thing is to be good to people, right? Because you never know who's going to come back and give you that blessing, right? And secondly, network across. Everyone wants to grab somebody's leg so they can go up. Network across. Sometimes network down, right? And be able to determine who's going to be next, right? So there's a lot of raw, untapped talent sometimes in people. And maybe sometimes you have to be the first guy to invest in that person and say, hey, you're really good at this. You might not have all the resources or know exactly what you're doing yet, but come over here, rock with me, and let's figure it out together. So, but I will say that everything I've done so far has been through the network that I've built. It's not some guy seeing my music on YouTube or Instagram and DMing me, hey, bro, it's people that I've been growing with or I've met along the way. They see that I'm working and I'm working hard, and they want to help me out, or they want to support that, or they want to work with me because they're also working. You know what I'm saying? So harness the network you already have. Look at the people next to you. Everyone is looking above, but look at the people next to you. Because you got to remember, if someone's above you, why are they going to look to you to help them out for the most part? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to have something to offer them, and you got to realize that they worked hard to be able to turn your ass down, right? Because they can't work with everyone because they've built that. They've worked and they've built that. You know, so you need to work and build that too. And if you work and build that, you won't even ask for a leg up because you'll be right next to them. You know what I'm saying? So that's the way that I navigate the whole networking thing. I network across, you know what I'm saying? I'm good to people. So nobody can ever say that I did any bad business or anything like that. And it always comes back tenfold.
And so that's kind of like the 33% rule, where it's like, spend 33% of your time with your peers, 33% of people that maybe are at a level below you, and try to spend 33% with people above you. And naturally, you'll cultivate a community of people that are willing to help you, people that you can work with, and people that you can give advice to.
For sure.
I'm curious your thoughts on that. Like, is that kind of similar with the ideology that you have?
Yeah, I mean, like, I definitely think you should 100. That doesn't mean don't be in the room with some. So I have another philosophy. Like, if you're always the smartest guy in the room, then you need to leave the room, right? Because there's nothing for you there. Everyone else is there to gain from you, which is fine. But that means, like, if you're always in that room, eventually you're gonna have nothing to give because everyone's always pulling from you, and you're getting nothing back in return, right? So if you're the smartest person in the room, you should definitely be in another room. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't spend time back in those rooms, because also you got to give back what you get, right? So if I managed to get a platinum record, or when I managed to get a platinum record, it's going to be my duty to tell other people how I got here, right? And I think that's being in that room. But at the same time, I'm trying to get 3, 4, 5 platinum records. So I need to go talk to the dudes that already did that and go find out from them, how do I go from 1 to 5? You know what I'm saying? And then going over here and telling the guy how he goes from 0 to 1, right? So I think it's very much balanced, you know?
I respect that. Have you made your best song yet?
Nah, not even close.
Definitely not, right?
Yeah.
So what is the perspective of if somebody's listening to this for the first time, what's the one song that you'd recommend they listen to that tells them who you are?
That tells them who I am? That might not be the song I want to tell them to go listen to first, though. But I don't. The song that probably tells you the best about who I am is not out yet. But the song that I would tell people to go listen to first is probably Splenda. It's the easiest to digest.
Word.
And I feel like based on my experiences, you tell people to listen to music not just based on what's the best song. Sometimes it might just be what's the best entry point, you know, because sometimes your best song, they might not be ready for that. So you want to ease them on in through the door and be like, okay, this guy is all right. But if I come off the gate crazy, then though it's a good song, it just might be kind of crazy for them. So exactly. But the song that is the most about me is called 20 Somethings. And that was about my whole experience from working and going to college and all of that stuff, and then going to pursue music. I put it all in that one record, which is going to be on that first Rooms EP.
For Rooms EP coming soon?
Yes.
Word up. Bet. And so are you still making tweaks, making adjustments to that all the time? Yeah.
So I think I've learned to be on my own time. As an artist, sometimes we feel like we have to constantly put stuff out for people. But again, like in the space of like a Kendrick or even a Cole or a lot of these greats, right? They're not putting out music literally every single month or every 6 months. We're not getting an album, you know? So that's because they're on their time. Versus a Drake, who is still great, but the kind of music he makes and who he is as an artist demands more music, right? So I think it kind of varies. But me personally, I'm on my own time. So I am going to continue to release singles until I've garnered where I feel like is a good fan base and garnered that demand for an album, because I ain't putting out an album until there's enough people to listen to it.
And finding that formula and figuring out, just like data analytics metrics, right? For people that are in tech too, it's like it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
You put stuff out, you figure out what they want to hear, you figure out what the audience is, and then you give them what they want.
For sure.
Right?
And feeling.
I feel it. Word up, man. And so is there one thing on Cut Different we like to do is we like to give game, right? So, you know, you obviously being as articulate, intelligent as you are, I'm sure there's a piece of game that you'd recommend, right? If there's maybe a mistake that you've made that now you learned from and you're like, hey, don't make this mistake. Or just one piece of knowledge, one piece of advice that you'd give to somebody watching this that wants to, you know, be where you are or become an artist in general, what would that be?
You only have today, and don't wait around for the perfect opportunity for things, because it might never come. So if you want to do something today, start today. It took me a long time to start doing something I knew I always wanted to do. And I ultimately still ended up doing it, right? So I'm just blessed to be able to still do it, but many people might not have that chance. So if you want to do something and you know deep down this is what you want and you want to do it, whether it's you want to tell a girl you love her, or whether it's, you want this cheeseburger right now, or whether it's you want to be a astrophysicist, you know what I'm saying? Whatever you want to do, don't let anyone stop you. Start today. Don't wait for the right opportunity, because then you'll never actually go after what you want.
Bet. I appreciate that. And where can they find you? Like, where can they find your music? Where can they find you on social media if they're coming directly from this video today?
For sure. It's at DonKnock, D-O-N, knock, like you're knocking on a door. Real easy for them, for sure.
Word up, man. Well, we appreciate you coming on Cut Different today. We're looking forward to your performance. And we're going to ask you a few more questions here a little bit later, too. Man. But thank you for sharing what you've shared today. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Cut Different TV. I go by the name of Sebastian Ryder. This is
DonKnock with there.
It was a pleasure having y'all. See you next time. Peace.
Boom.